The Vita has seen a handful of racing games released for it, and while I have benchmarked Need for Speed Most Wanted and Mod Nation Pod Racers, there are more left to be touched on. For the month of August, I'll be taking a look at 2 of the system's racing games a week and any applicable resolution hacks that can be applied to them, to see how far we can push the game to get the best visuals while maintaining solid performance. This week, I'll be kicking off the month with World Rally Champion 3 and 4, both of which have native resolution hacks available for them. As usual, screenshot galleries and how to apply resolution hacks for these games are in the description. Welcome to Turbo August. WRC 3 and 4 are originally rendered at 702 by 448, or just 60% of 544p. They share a default clock speed profile of 333 MHz and 166 MHz for the CPU and GPU respectively. While clarity on the Vita screen does not take too much of a hit at this resolution, one thing I'm not a fan about both these games' feature sets is their use of texture dithering. This technique produces a lot of shimmering, in some cases even while not moving. I think the game would have benefited from a traditional texture filtering method. But on to performance, we start off with WRC 3. U-turns are a real point of contention with this game. They cause the frame rate to drop very often on every type of terrain except dry gravel, as your car kicks up alpha effects on every other type of terrain. Plus, these drops in frame rate while U-turning cause a noticeable judder. Normally it drops a frame rate to around 27 FPS, but there were a few cases of it dropping to 24 FPS and an edge case of it dropping down to 19 FPS. However, frame rate drops are still possible on dry gravel as a result of U-turns and tight drifts. Otherwise, there were very few cases of the scenery being the cause for sustained frame rate drops from the courses I sampled, all of which were between 27 to 28 FPS. The beginning of Diff Knot and around the 2/5 of Hollandsburg were the worst cases, with Diff Knot alternating between 28 and 30 FPS for a period of 26 seconds, and Hollandsburg lasting around 8 seconds and dropping as low as 26 FPS. The best performing course in my test was Arena Panzerplatte, where it only dropped to 29 FPS twice at the very end of the track. However, the game offers multiple view modes, so I gave the cockpit view a shot, and it does a great job at smoothing out performance. U-turns and drifts are no longer an issue. The drop in Hollandsburg is now gone, and all other frame rate drops caused by scenery are improved by 1 frame per second. Now, maps play nearly locked with only a couple of dips to 29 FPS. If this game is going to see a locked 30 FPS on all maps, maximum clock speeds are going to need to be engaged. Once we ramp up the GPU and CPU to their max clock speeds, the game sees a lock to 30 FPS in cockpit view and a lock to 30 FPS for the rear view outside of crashes and a select instance of panning the camera while gravel was kicked up. However, this improved performance does not entirely remove the occasional judder when making sharp turns, even if the game stays at its 30 FPS target. Suffice to say, the rear view still is not a 100% optimal experience. However, the cockpit view appears to have a lot of headroom, so I went straight for the jugular and increased the game's resolution to the full 544p, a 66% increase in pixel count over the original resolution. Environments and the car interior see some nice improvements, however trees are a real stick in the mud with how low resolution their textures are. And the usual culprit in racing simulators like this, spectators, still stand out in their low detail glory. And unfortunately, 544 PC stages that were previously locked for the cockpit view now see many extended periods of drops in frame rate. These normally stay at 27 FPS or higher, but can fall just a bit lower to 26 FPS. Granted, you can get a solid 30 FPS alongside cliffs or across many stretches of road, and if you are curious about the rear view, it sees drop to 28 FPS along the cliffside, but with the drifts and U-turns back in play, you may see lengths of time where it holds 30 FPS, but performance is constantly bogged down with periods of frame rates at 26 or 28 FPS, dropping as low as 24 FPS, edge cases not considered. While the rear view shows it does not have too much headroom to work with, the cockpit view is just a little ways off from perfect performance, so if you're looking to get a locked 30 FPS 99.9% of the time, I found that running the game at 864 by 492 on maximum clock speeds does the job. At 34% more pixels than 448p and being 81% of 544p, it isn't the most striking improvement, but it's the highest resolution possible without sacrificing performance in all capacities. Up next is WRC 4. In an effort to optimize the game more, alpha effects previously seen as you drove across most terrain has been either removed or pared back. I tested the longest course for 8 of the 13 regions, and 5 of them ran mostly locked to 30 FPS while in rear view. Germany, France, Spain, Sweden, and Mexico all only had a few dips to 28 FPS, but Australia stayed around 28 FPS throughout most of the race, with a low of 24 FPS, and Monte Carlo and Great Britain saw drops during U-turns as low as 25 FPS. Now if we take a look at the cockpit view, changing gears or using the handbrake causes the frame rate to drop as low as 26 FPS when it should otherwise be locked so often that it greatly hampers the experience. Seems like a strange thing to cause such a problem. However, if the CPU's clock is raised to 444 MHz, performance is fixed, and neither of these things are an issue anymore. Now at this configuration, we actually see Monte Carlo locked at 30 FPS, Spain, France, Germany, and Sweden with only a couple of dips as low as 28 FPS, Australia and Mexico with only slightly worse performance, and Great Britain that has lows of 25 FPS in the first section of Hofren with many other dips in frame rate. Now luckily, all of these courses already run well enough so that maximum clock speeds can lock the game to 30 FPS. Just like WRC 3, 492p is the maximum resolution for a locked 30 FPS in cockpit view. 544p may be out of the question for a 100% lock, however Sweden runs at a locked 30 FPS, and in my limited testing at that resolution, all other maps perform about the same as they do at 448p with only the CPU bumped up. The fourth section of Mexico is 1 FPS higher than 448p at stock speeds, but Monte Carlo performed worse, so it's really a mixed bag there. You may be able to get a locked 30 FPS in most cases in rear view if you find another resolution higher than 448p, but 492p already brings limited improvements over 448p, so you'd be hard pressed to get anything too substantial out of another found resolution. Well, that wraps up WRC 3 and 4. I'll be back next Sunday with 2 more titles in my coverage of Vita games for the month of August. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.